I want to share a secret with you. The secret to living a resilient life. Well, hey there. I'm Jonathan Atwell, lead pastor of CrossRoads Church. And in this video, I want to introduce you to what it means to live a resilient life and start you on a journey toward real resilience built on faith in Jesus. Now, two questions as we get started. Number one, what is resilience? Well, resilience is the ability to face trauma and to bounce back to living a life of wellness. And this definition is important because sometimes in life, we just can't avoid trauma. It happens. It can come from our own mistakes or failures. It can come from our environment, or sometimes other people, sometimes people we really care about, traumatize us. So, second question, why Jesus? You know, faith in Jesus is not the only source of resilience. There are a lot of very resilient people out there who don't believe in Him. But if, like me, you've found you need more than your own ability to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, I want to invite you to hang with me for the next few minutes as I introduce you to what the Bible tells us about finding resilience in Jesus. Now, one of the things that I love about the Bible is that most of the time it uses stories to teach us about God. Over the next few weeks, as we talk about resilience, we're going to look back at the story from the book of Genesis, the story of a man named Joseph. Joseph started out life in this really great place. He was the favorite son of a well-off sheep rancher. Sheep rancher, is a sheep rancher a thing? I don't know. But that didn't last. In the same chapter that Joseph was introduced, we see him begin to face trauma. And I don't mean just a little bit, I mean a lot. Trauma from his family, trauma from his employer, trauma from prison. But in the end, in the face of all this trauma, we find that Joseph was resilient. And that's what resilience is. Resilience is returning to wellness after we face trauma. And in this first lesson, we're going to go to the end of Joseph's story. This story takes place toward the end of Joseph's life. In this verse, I'm going to share with you from the last chapter of the Old Testament book of Genesis. Joseph tells us in this verse the secret to his resilient life. As I lead you through this study, I'm going to read a verse from the Bible, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you some questions. Now, I want to encourage you to pause after each of these questions and process this for yourself. Really think about it, because these lessons are not about information, they're not about entertainment, they're about changing the way you think, act, and really, down deep, who you are. First though, if you're into praying, I want to encourage you, begin with a quick word of prayer. Just pause this video for a moment and quickly say a prayer asking God to help you understand what these verses from the end of Joseph's life teach us about resilience. Now, go ahead and pray and pause the video if you would like, and then come right back. We'll keep going. Now, this is Genesis 50, verse 20. Listen as I read it to you. I'm going to read it a couple times, and then take a minute after I read it to really think about it. Let it really sink in. Okay, Genesis 50:20 says this. This is Joseph talking to his brothers. You planned evil against me. God planned it for good to bring about the present result, the survival of many people. Take a breath. Let that soak in a moment. Let me read it again. You planned evil against me. God planned it for good to bring about the present result, the survival of many people. One more time. I'm not going to read quite the whole thing this time, because I want you to hear the first half or so of this verse. You planned evil against me. God planned it for good. Again, let it soak in for a minute. Pause the video if you need to. Now, let's talk about these questions we ask. Anytime we study the Bible at CrossRoads, we always ask three questions. The first two are this: what does it say about God, and what does it say about people? Let's think about that first question. Take a moment to pause the video, if you can, and really process that. What does this verse say about God? Okay, how did you answer that question? Now let me encourage you. Your answers don't have to feel deep. I've spent my whole life studying the Bible, and some of the most helpful truths we get from Scripture are also some of the most obvious. And the first observation I wanted to make about this verse is pretty obvious. God has a plan, right? And I know you may not have read about Joseph's life yet. Maybe you know all about him. Maybe you don't. But this guy had some serious trauma in his life. Some of it was inflicted by his brothers. And in this verse, he looks them in the eye and says, that trauma, that hurt, God intended it for good. The Bible tells us the God of the universe has a plan for each of us. God has a plan. Now, if you want to, pause the video and let that sink in for a minute. God has a plan for your life, even the hard stuff. And did you catch that other thing about God? His plan isn't just about you. It's about your life impacting others. God's plan in your life isn't just some kind of consolation prize. It's about your life changing the world. Wow. So now the second question. What does it say about people? Take a minute. Pause the video if you like and let that sink in. Really process that question. This one's a little more bleak, right? Because here's what it says. He's talking to his brothers. Some people are out to get us. Some people intend to harm us. Man, that's not good news, right? The Bible isn't always warm, happy thoughts. That's actually one of the things that I love about the Bible. The Bible's real. It's authentic. People hurt us. Sometimes the people closest to us hurt us the most. And it's not okay. Hurting someone is never okay. Being hurt is never okay. But thankfully, this verse also helps us understand what to do about it. And that's the third question we ask. What do we do about it? How does it change our response to trauma if we know God has a plan? How does God's plan change the context of our trauma? Now, the hard part. After we ask that third question, what do we do about it? Then we personalize that question. What do you need to do about it? To answer that question, I need to encourage you to do something pretty hard. And you might need somebody to do this hard thing with you. If you need somebody to help you, send me a note at info@crossroadsfortworth.org. I'm happy to help, because here's the thing. In order to process the trauma in your life and to find resilience, you might need to acknowledge that trauma in your life first. You may have to come to grips with the reality that someone has hurt you or you've been deeply hurt. And if someone has hurt you, it's probably somebody pretty close to you. But here's the thing. Once you acknowledge that trauma, you can also acknowledge God's plan. One of my absolute favorite verses is Romans 8:28. There, the Apostle Paul gives us a clearer understanding of God's plan when trauma comes into our lives. He writes, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose." The secret of resilience, as the Bible teaches it, is knowing that God is bigger than your trauma. And He's going to use it for good, not just in your life, but in the lives of the people around you as well. That everyone who trusts in Jesus and follows Him, man, God is using every bit of trauma in your life for the good. And just like Joseph understood in Genesis 50, that's God's plan for us as well. And we're going to keep talking about resilience on Sunday mornings. I'm going to keep talking about resilience here on YouTube as well. But feel free to send me a note if you can't wait. I'm excited to talk with you personally more about how we find resilience through faith in Jesus. And if you'd like to know more about our church or what it means to trust in Jesus, you can check out our website or you can check out this video. Thanks so much for joining me for this first Bible study about finding resilience in Jesus. Have a great day discovering Jesus.